I was shocked that Tim took over, like we were in our meeting, Tim took over the mouse and Denny's keyboard. We were all just like, whoa. You must have a lot of faith in your immune system.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. That's why.
Sorry.
All right. Scott, you ready? Okay. So you're going to have to forgive me tonight. I'm carrying a really horrible cold, so my brain will stop working and my voice will stop working. You want to scoot over more? Go sit over there with Scott.
Yeah, it's right.
Make it a nice quick meeting so you can get home.
I'll do my best. All right, I hereby call the 2,286th meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our first item of business is our outstanding Milwaukee High School student. So, Principal Gelman, if you'll please bring Max up.
Good evening. I'm very excited to introduce Max tonight. Max is obviously a senior at Milwaukee, and he is a phenomenal human being, just overall. I can't say enough nice things about him. Every time we nominate a student, I send out emails to the staff, and they give me information, and I received way more information about Max than any other student that we've had. He is an incredible human being, and I'm just really impressed with everything that he does. He does so much. I rarely see Max because he's just everywhere. He's in the elementary schools. He's at Sabin Schellenberg. He's working with the health clinic. He's all over the place. And as always, I'm going to read a couple of things that some teachers said about him. And I told Max I'm not reading all of them because there's a lot, but he can have these when we're done. Mr. Limman is one of our chemistry teachers, and he says, simply put, Max is a very compassionate, caring young man. He is on every club, vice president of the National Honor Society, co-director of Relay for Life, director of the Youth Advisory Council. He lives here. He does so much to help others, always. I am blessed and honored to work with him in chemistry the last 3 years. And it didn't hurt that he passed the AP chemistry exam last year as a junior and is taking it again this year to do a better job. I'm sure you did really well last year. He is the finest example of a model student and human being. I love this man. Oh, and it didn't hurt that on my birthday, when Max presented me with an embroidered white lab coat with my name on it, that I cherish and will forever cherish. He's a great exemplar of a true Mustang. So that's one. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Brought tears to my eyes. And then another one, oh yay, I could write a novel about Max, but here are some highlights. Max is involved with the MHS Youth Advisory Council for 4 years. His leadership within the group generates meaningful projects and sustainability, while also retaining members due to his character and ability to create meaningful relationships with his peers. Max is kind, reliable, approachable, and creative. His graphic design skills are incredible, and he has helped many clubs at Milwaukee High School and Milwaukee Academy of the Arts and RAU with marketing. Max is involved with YAC, Habitat for Humanity, Relay for Life, and the National Honor Society. She says, I may be forgetting some, but he is always willing to lend a helping hand. He is genuinely dedicated to helping others, especially his fellow Mustangs. He is passionate about elevating adolescent voices and community resources so everyone can be as healthy and happy as possible. He never stops working and is always 2 steps ahead of me with his visions. He is one of the best students I've ever interacted with, and he has impacted Milwaukee High School for generations to come. And that's from the Health and Wellness Coordinator, Hannah Smith. So those are just 2 comments that people say about Max, 2 comments that were said about Max. And I also just brought a little example. A teacher saved these, but let me me see. So here's just an example of Max's kindness. So last year, during finals week in his chemistry class, he brought snacks for students. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but whenever there's finals in school, kids are falling apart. Many kids, they get lots of anxiety, they're stressed out. And so Max just did this very sweet gesture of bringing snacks to kids and saying have a groovy day. Donuts. Stay hydrated, right? Like it's just so awesome that he would think of that and do that for his fellow classmates. I think that I've never seen a student do that just on their own. So thank you so much for being such a great person.
Thank you.
Are you going to, well, why don't you tell us, I know that we're always curious about where you're thinking about going after you graduate or what you're thinking about doing.
Yeah, well, for all of high school, I've been involved in the graphic design program at Saban Schellenberg. So that's been sort of my goal for a while, but after being involved in nonprofits and clubs for all 4 years, I think I'm going to go that route. And I'm looking at going to PSU starting next year and studying community development, going into either the nonprofit world or local government. Just, when you get so used to doing community service like this, 20 plus hours a week, it becomes more of a lifestyle than anything. So wanting to continue doing that and spinning that into a Master's of Public Administration.
Excellent. All right, so who wants to start tonight?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's great. And it's nice to hear that you're interested in nonprofit. I worked in nonprofit for 30 years, Chambers of Commerce, but still it's a nonprofit organization. But there's some really good schools that have organizational management degrees, and that's what mine is in, from the University of San Francisco. And, cool things to look into, lots of opportunity. I would like to know a little bit about the North Clackamas Oral Health Program. I have never heard of that before, Max.
Yeah, so the North Clackamas Oral Health Program is a program sponsored by Neighborhood Health Center, and I've been involved with them for about 3 years now, and it's honestly my favorite thing that I do at school. About once a month, we go to every single elementary school over the course of a year, and we teach dental learning labs, they're called. And they're just little stations. They scale depending on the grade, but they're all designed to teach the elementary schoolers about what it's like to go to the dentist and how to take care of their teeth properly. And it's one of my favorite things just because it's so hands-on and you get to see them really start to understand and how to take care of their own oral health and their well-being. But yeah, it's any station from just seeing what it's like to sit in a dental hygienist chair, what the tools are like, and what questions they might be asked. And it's dealing with 6-year-olds up until 5th grade, so.
That sounds great. It probably takes away a lot of the fear of going. Yeah, wish they'd had that when I was young.
And after we go in, we send in a dental hygienist, and we get really good reports. They're not intimidated at all. They get sealants, and yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for your service to that and so many, many other things. You're another amazing Milwaukee High School student. Thanks, Carmen.
Thank you very much.
I can go next. You're all looking at my general direction. So. I'll second the glad to hear that you're thinking about local government. You have seems like you have demonstrated a unique intersection that a lot of people don't have, where you have that personal connection, sort of motivation that comes from the heart. You have really critical communication skills, and you've got the brain to push it all out into the world with purpose and drive. So I'm glad to hear that's in the mix. I also come from the nonprofit background, and I know that you will find lots of people who have that mix in that world. So it should be a good fit for you if that's where you really do end up, What do you do to relax? Because you're kind of stressing me out a little.
Well, I don't get home until about 6 most nights, because the clubs take up a lot of my time. But, it's relaxing for me. I just always going.
Yeah. Okay, good. Don't forget to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
You're a precious resource.
Thank you very much. So my daughter brings home the packs that you
Oh,
give
really?
with the, and she loves it. She loves putting away her little flossing and flossing.
Oh,
And
flossing.
so thanks for sending those along because she loves them. So you have here in Milwaukee a resource that you should tap into. Our community development director is amazing.
Yeah.
We love her so much. So I would encourage you to reach out to her and talk to her about a future as in local government, in particular, and community development.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I think I agree. I think, if you do end up pursuing that, it does sound like an amazing fit, and Portland State has a wonderful program for you. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about the Youth Advisory Council from your perspective in light of your interest in local government, and I've got a question for you.
Okay.
My question, aren't you?
Do you think that that your organization would benefit from more interaction between the city of Milwaukee and the high school, in particular the the Youth Advisory Council?
Absolutely. We always try to incorporate the community into what we're doing. Just this month, we're actually going down to Salem as part of our Advocacy Day that we do every year in seek of more funding and just putting ourselves on the radar of government at the state level. But we'd love to have the city incorporated into that as well, because the health center, although it's for students in the district, we would like to provide as services for as wide an audience as we can.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for everything that you're doing, and thanks for coming and honoring us with your presence. And I just want to say thank you also. There are some adults behind you who look very supportive, and so thank you to you. And as always, thank you, Principal Gelman, for bringing us just another wonderful young person.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Max, you're very impressive. In addition to everything that Principal Gelman mentioned, she'd also sent us some information. You also have the science behind it. You're an AP biology and AP chemistry, and that's not a light load. So in addition to all your good humanitarian and community work, you're carrying a heavy student load. I was going to ask you what your favorite thing of your activities are, but you already answered that, so I won't ask that. But I think, oh man, I had something I wanted to say and now I've lost it. I think it'd be great to have you more, you and the school itself, more in tune with the community. More in regular contact with the city council and find some way to make better connections there. And I just wish you all the best in your next steps.
Very much.
So yeah, I had two things in that realm that I wanted to sort of get your opinion on, because you seem like the perfect person to ask. One is, a few of us have been kicking around the idea of potentially doing like a youth city council.
Mm-hmm.
There would be an advisory council to the city council. Do you think that's something that would be valuable to students and would be well received, or they'd be, yeah?
I think that would be very well received, yeah. There's not just me, there's plenty of leaders that I work with. I can't do it all alone, and I think they have a lot to say about the community. And we already feel so involved in Milwaukee High School, but we always want to keep expanding, and if we can impact the city as a whole, we'd love to do so.
Cool. So the second one is similar. I don't know if you caught the news recently, but Senator Fagan is proposing that we change the voting age to 16. She's got a bill before the legislature. And my experience of the high school students that you bring forward, I would rather have them voting than some of the adults. So I think it's an outstanding idea. But I'm curious, again, to looking at, sort of the totality of your classmates and the juniors, do you think that is something that they would take seriously and really truly engage on and learn about the candidates and then get out and actually vote?
To a large extent, I already think students are more invested in that than many adults. There's not many adults sitting in an AP government class at the moment, but there's many 16-year-olds who are, and they're not doing that for the credit. They enjoy it, and I think although there is going to be a mix of students who are apathetic towards it, those students are not going to be the ones voting. It's the ones who are actively engaged. So I think it's a great idea.
Cool. Good to know. Well, we'll continue that discussion and decide whether to support her bill. All right, so let's do this. Excuse me if I lose my voice. The City of Milwaukee is proud to recognize for outstanding student achievement in academics, civic engagement, and extracurricular activities at Milwaukee High School, Max Pennick. Let it be known to all on this 19th day of February 2019, the City Council of the City of Milwaukee, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, recognize this student as an excellent example of the bright future of this community and nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now take another picture.
Don't touch it.
Can we ask Principal
Keep him
Gilman
well.
for a construction update? Oh, she's taking pictures. Okay.
I do, I got it with them looking at it. And usually, I'm in there too. Oh, take one more.
Thank you very much. All right.
As he's sitting back there, I didn't even touch the surface of everything he does, so it's just incredible. Construction-wise, today we have laid out the plans for Phase 2, which is the remodel of the commons area and the counseling area. And so over spring break, they're going to start remodeling in some areas over there in the counseling section. We have stairs now. We have 2 stories built with cement. Not completely built, but they're moving along just fine. Everything is happening on time. We found out we're going to be hosting summer school, so I was okay with that as long as it didn't impede any of the construction, because our goal is to get in the fall of 2020. But everything's on time. Lake Road, we're looking at hopefully by next week, they'll be handing over Lake Road to us, which is our baseball and softball facilities, which are state-of-the-art, beautiful. I think they're the finest in the state from what I'm hearing, so I'm very excited about that. And I think that's about it with the construction. We're just moving along and trying to get everything done, and lots of things keep popping up, and it's actually been a really great opportunity to fix things and implement things that weren't in place that needed to be, like more cameras that we needed in the art building, for example. And so as we're going through this process, we're able to identify some areas that need some fixing. Part of the new building is that even with our performing arts building, they're remodeling some bathrooms. When they did the performing arts building, when they built that or remodeled it, the bathrooms were really old, and so those were left like that. So they're remodeling that area, a new paint job, some things on the roof, and then also with our gymnasium. So.
Well, I noticed the other day that you can start to see a 3rd floor now. It's come up a lot just over the winter.
It's exciting. I had them build me an office over winter break so I could be out with the kids. Mm-hmm. And I have a window now where I see kids walking up, but I also get to see the construction going on. Mm-hmm. And so it's very cool. And I think a lot of people feel very good about seeing that, because it's like tangible. You actually get to see it. And so people, I think, are getting excited as where before it was like, oh, we're in mods and that kind of situation. But now people are starting to get excited. So
Great.
Okay. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have our new Metro Councilor, Christine Lewis. How long will you still be new? When should I stop saying that?
I was about to preface this by saying this is the first time I'm giving this presentation, so pardon me while I do my notes. Mayor, councilors, thank you for the opportunity to be here today for a Metro update. My hope is that this is going to be something that I do more often and that we stay in good communication. I know, Mayor, I see you at a number of regional tables, but I think it's important to be here in community and also directly with the rest of y'all as counselors who are working on sometimes different priorities and projects. Look at us. That's a good-looking group of people. So we've got some new faces on council, including Council President Peterson, Councilor Gonzalez, and myself. We are all 6 weeks in, and we're still saying we're new. So I'll let you know when it's time to move on, saying we're not new anymore. So, as you know, some of my top priorities coming into office are transportation, housing, and then really raising the neighborhood and community voices in our placemaking process. And I think some of that means making sure that we have residents sitting at the table and also making sure that this district isn't overlooked. And we have seen some really successful community investment through Metro here in Milwaukee. That should be studied and modeled for how we can actually do investment in other parts of this district. So to start out with, in Parks and Nature, we have a new Oxbow Regional Park Welcome Center. After about a year of construction, the Welcome Center opened, and it now features informational displays about the park, geology, plants and animals, as well as art reflective of the park surroundings. And if you haven't been out there, you should go. If you have been, then you know exactly what kind of special place this is. Other news around parks is we are potentially going to be going this November to renew our Parks and Nature bond with additional investment that would continue to protect clean water, restore our fish and wildlife habitat, and connect people to nature closer to home. Metro Council's had a number of meetings since January. I think I've been in office 6 weeks. I think we've had at least 6 work sessions around parks to get the temperature check from the new council. And we are informed by community input, but we're starting to work on an initial framework that's going to focus on racial equity and climate resiliency across 6 areas of investment: land acquisition and restoration, improvements at Metro Parks, community grants, local government allocations, trails, and then urban transformation projects. A major urban transformation project potentially in this district just down the road would be Willamette Falls. That's one that is kind of the hallmark when we talk about what urban transformation could really mean. This winter and spring, Metro will work with partners and community members to fine-tune the investment criteria and to identify potential projects and buckets of funding. Garbage and recycling, a couple of things. One, last July, Metro Council adopted a regional requirement that businesses start composting or separate food scraps from the rest of their garbage stream in 2020. And so by July 31 of this year, local municipalities are going to be asked to have code amendments or amend ordinances in order to allow collection franchises or take other action for garbage haulers to provide collection services to these affected businesses. Metro staff is working closely with garbage and recycling from the counties and various cities in the region to help implement this policy. So hopefully you know more about this than I do. But I think it's still on the staff level, but definitely hope that that is something that we're working seamlessly on. And we're continuing on the Metro side to engage businesses and local governments as the policy is rolled out. Second, we are coordinating with local governments to develop a regional communication strategy about wishful recycling and to reduce contamination in our stream, in home recycling specifically. Materials collected through home recycling programs are finding their way to new markets due to challenges in the processing facilities. And we are also working at the local and state level with industry on long-term planning to make sure that the system stays resilient. Got a bump in the news at the middle to end of last year, and it's quieted off. Doesn't mean the problem's going away. And then third, our regional waste plan, it's the 2030
regional waste plan was really worked on by the last council. We've been digging in on it, and we are going to have a February 28th public hearing on the regional waste plan with the goal to adopt the 2030 plan in early March. And we will be working with local governments in order to implement the steps laid out in that plan. And it's a long list of steps, so I think many of them are ambitious, and we're going to need to phase in which ones we start with. Transportation. Just to give you an update, just to give you an update on where we are in our process. Metro was able to go poll voters to find out where voters are on transportation, and in order to inform whether we should pursue a transportation bond measure in November of 2020. And the snapshot said that voters find transportation to be a very high priority and that there is a high willingness to pay. This by no means that a 2020 measure is a slam dunk, and we have a lot of work to do. And we need to make sure that we build a measure that voters can trust and that we can build support. The main takeaway from the poll is whatever we do, it needs to be a program that helps everyone, no matter what their primary mode of transportation is currently and what they desire it to be. And our transportation measure will be informed by the work of a transportation measure steering committee or task force, and we just commissioned that task force at last Thursday's meeting. It's a group of 35 individuals from across the spectrum, business, community from across the region that will be advising the council president, in addition to stakeholder groups and work that we do as councilors to solicit input from our district. And then coming on to where we have opportunities to really implement the affordable housing bond. Metro Council voted in January to appoint 13 people to an oversight committee that was required in our housing measure to oversee our region's $652 million affordable housing program. The committee will review the plans from the local jurisdictions. And there are 7 jurisdictions here. We would be using Clackamas County to make sure that the local plans are reasonable proposals to meet the goals set out by the bond. And the group's first meeting was held on February 6th. I was able to attend about half of the meeting, and we are really lucky. It is a solid group of rock stars, and we also have good Clackamas County representation in that group. Just a reminder that the bond was approved by 59% of the region's voters, and it's aiming to provide stable, affordable housing for 12,000 people in the greater Portland area. So while the hard work of passing a measure is done, the hard work of implementation is still ahead. We have 2 grant planning programs that are underway or are about to commence this spring. The 2040 Planning and Development Grants are focused on creating equitable housing and economic opportunities by helping communities prepare for their future. It's the 7th grant cycle for this grant, and letters of intent are being accepted through March 8th. The second grant that's underway is the Community Placemaking Grants. These support creative projects that empower and involve community members to make changes that they want to see at the neighborhood level. And Metro accepted applications for the 2019 cycle between January 4th and February 4th. And grant awards will be announced, I believe, in April. And I'm actually sitting on the review panel for that. So that work is underway to start the evaluation process on that grant. News from the Oregon Convention Center. Oregon Convention Center does a lot of work to bring tourist dollars into the region, but we also make sure that we have programs that can fuel your hobbies and passions, including Wizard World and the Portland Golf Show, Portland Women's Expo, Bricks Cascade. Those are just a few of upcoming activities that might be of interest to people in our community. Portland Center 5 for the Arts. We are working on rolling out our noontime showcase, which is bite-sized entertainment for you to squeeze into your lunch hour. And these are free monthly performances that will feature some of Portland's most popular acts. So just making sure that we have arts that are accessible to members of our community, including some of the more traditional performances that have been at the PC5. I should say, for those previous two slides, I sit as the MERC liaison, so I will be spending a significant amount of my time actually tracking some of the structural issues that we have as Metro relating to the convention center and to P5. Oregon Zoo, as you know, we manage a zoo, and I got to meet some elephants last week. It was great. But I just want to make sure everybody knows that in this community, that on second Tuesday, you can enjoy the Oregon Zoo for a fraction of the cost with $5 admission per person. And in terms of some of the wildlife education that we're able to do, we have a monthly pub talk program that's supported by the Oregon Zoo Foundation. But the pub talks will continue into 2019 with some really strong educational programming with scientists, and I thought they looked interesting. So there's more information on the website for folks who are interested in learning, not necessarily more about our zoo, but about some of the species that we work to protect. Oh, and Endangered Species Day is on May 18th, so save the date if you're looking for a good May holiday. So at the Expo Center, we have community events coming up that include Kid Fest, America's largest antique and collectible show, and the Metro Dealers 61st RV show. And reminding folks that the Expo Center is right off the Max Yellow line, easy to get to. And with that, I'm here for your questions and comments and anything that I need to be taking back to my fellow counselors or things that should be on my radar.
Nothing?
Thanks for the update.
Covered a lot of areas and did a great job.
Yeah.
We should, I don't have a question. I mean, we obviously have an interest in the parks bond measure for various parks in Milwaukee, but I think, you know.
Transportation.
And transportation, but I'm just looking to this fall.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, I'm sure staff is already talking to staff at Metro, so I don't have a particular question about that, just that it will be very important to us, the local share and the funding some projects that our citizens want.
Thank you. Yeah, our regional investment strategy, which is really ambitious at this moment to be thinking both parks and transportation at the same time. It's critical that we think about how they connect and how they connect to housing, because we are at that point in both the kind of cycle with elections ahead of us, but also people's attention. We've got it now. And in terms of local share, I've raised the fact that we need to have local investment as part of this, and support from council for sure.
Yeah, great.
And I would say that it's great to see the part where Metro is working on waste stream and getting compostable materials out of it. That certainly aligns with the climate action plan that we put together as a city. And, you know, with these sorts of regional issues, we can only do so much. So it's great that our regional partner is right there with us on that.
Absolutely. And the 2030 plan, I think, will have us go far further pretty quickly, actually, in terms of what our next steps are. But having the business stream dealt with first is a big step.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I see her twice a month.
Well, thanks for making us your first stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me use my notes.
We can tell.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stay. I think, well, actually, I might get a snack and then I'm gonna come back because I'm really excited about some of the other things on your agenda tonight.
You're always
so,
welcome.
Yeah,
Good.
thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christine.
All right.
Yeah, sounds good.
That's okay. We're great.
Trying to be further from Denny.
Yeah, I am.
All right. So, the next item is the Council Compensation Task Force, and this will be presented by our City Manager, Ann Ober, and not Justin Garrick.
No, actually, Lynn Davis from Healthy
Yeah.
Democracy is here tonight. And we're here because we think we've come to an agreement about how this could work if Healthy Democracy was to lead a process looking at council compensation. So we have some sideboards we'd like to talk to you about tonight to see if we can come to some general agreements so that they can make a decision about moving forward with the city. But he's going to start by giving a general description of what they do.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks so much. So we are a small nonprofit, nonpartisan nonprofit that works internationally actually, but it's based here in Portland. It's been around for about 10 years. And we work on new kinds of democratic innovation of a variety of kinds. The best known one being the Citizens Initiative Review, which you might know is a group of randomly selected representative citizens from around the state that get in a room in Salem, evaluate information about ballot measures, and produce a one-page statement that goes into the voters' pamphlet. So that's been part of Oregon law for about, we'll say it's 2011 actually. And has now moved on to several other states and now into another country actually just recently. And the really significant thing about that for us is that it has been backed up by quite a lot of research. It's one of the most researched citizen deliberative processes around the world that have shown it to produce accurate information and to be fair. So we have started to sort of branch out into other things and look at local government as a place where democratic engagement can be fostered in new kinds of ways, and but throughout that we will be following our sort of core values of political neutrality, transparency, real world impact, among many others, and I think that's very important. So I just wanted to walk you through the process that we're sort of have been talking about a bit. It would be a 5-day process. And I should start by saying that because this is a pilot for us, we want to pilot this, and it would be called a citizens policy jury. That's sort of the name we've landed on for the moment. This is something that's been around for 40 years or so, but has sort of expanded in popularity recently, particularly to tackle really difficult issues that may be difficult for city staff or electeds to deal with. And so here's the sort of process. There's two parts. There's a selection method, which is something called a civic lottery or a sortition process that involves a combination of random selection, sending out a bunch of mailings. Members of the public are chosen at random. And then from the respondents, citizens are chosen using another randomized and anonymous process. But the result is also demographically representative on a number of factors: age, gender, political party, etc. Then the actual event itself, as I said, is 5 days, would probably be spread across 3 weekends, and a total of about 35 hours or so. It's very structured and will be facilitated by a team of professional moderators. It essentially has 4 segments. The first is an introduction to the topic, process, some background briefing materials in written form. Then research by the panel, questioning of experts that would be selected in advance by a third party, by folks at Portland State actually, and the sorting of that information. And then establishing of criteria that will be considered in making recommendations, and then of course the final, very important, deliberation on the actual recommendations using all that gathered information.
So in this process, we've been trying to come to some general agreements about what would happen to make sure that the voice was heard of the community. So the first piece is, and we don't have to have these tonight, but if we could, it'd be great to reach this point, is a general agreement from all of you about what your involvement or lack of involvement would be in this process. So the first is that the elected officials would have no contact with any of the panelists at any point in the process, before, during, or after. In order to make sure that happened, any individuals who had signed petitions or sent emails or anything would actually be removed from the process, just to make sure it's very transparent that these are undecided individuals who would be receiving the information and then making the decision. or recommendation, I should say. Elected officials shall not willfully encourage campaigning by members of their supporters during the process, either within the venue or without, and they shall actively discourage any attempt by anyone other than Healthy Democracy's process team to have any contact with the panelists. That includes staff, so we would not be involved in any way. I have had one request just to provide some historic information about the city itself. So we would actually, I haven't talked to him yet, but Scott Stauffer would probably develop a historic component for just our form of government to be able to provide that to this process. But otherwise, Portland State University and their partners would actually be the ones to take the individuals through the process to learn about form of government, services, that type of thing. So that they can have a deliberative process as a group. And then finally, due to the nature of the topic, elected officials would not observe any of the proceedings. It is going to be an open meeting, so we would publicly notice it. We would actually have a separated area where people could come in and watch. That helps add faith to this being a truly deliberative process. But we don't want to have a chilling effect on that, so we want to make sure that there's no conversations between the public and those individuals. Those individuals are free to have their own discussion and to make decisions. Are there any concerns with any of those things? None. Perfect. You good? Mm-hmm. Okay. The outcomes agreement. So we also are trying to figure out how we're going to take that information into the council. So there's some agreements in this. The first is that we have stated in the past, or all of you have stated in the past, that this would only affect future councils. So once you go through an election, it would affect the newly elected individual. That may mean that there is a separated process where certain individuals get paid more at one point and then others 2 years later. I just want to confirm that with Lynn in the room. And then that the Healthy Democracy Group asked that we respect the recommendations of the citizen panel that can be done by either formally responding to the panel's recommendations with rationale as to why recommendations will or will not be followed. So you don't have to actually adopt these, but we do owe them back a response that says this is why we did or did not. Adopting the recommendations with modifications or adopting the recommendations in their entirety. Can we agree to that? Go for it.
Okay. No, that's fine.
I mean, I don't know what adopting the recommendations exactly means, because I could see a recommendation that I felt needed to go to the voters.
We're going to get to that next.
Okay.
We're just not quite to that slide.
Okay.
But yes, that's absolutely, we're going to set some sideboards before we start so that all of you can say what those thresholds need to be.
Okay.
So, sidebar. Previously, there was a council conversation that $1,000 per month could be the threshold for whether or not a recommendation should go to the voters. We didn't ever have an in-depth conversation about that, and I'm wondering what process you'd like us to go through with you in order to figure that out. That was a somewhat arbitrary number. I have looked at the history, trying to figure out where council compensation was at what points in time. We know that council received a stipend increase in 1989. We haven't been able to figure out what that increase was from and to. We're trying to figure that out. And then we also know that in 2007, it went from $150 to $200 and from $250 to $300. So we know that there's been some progression over time, and we can get you that before any final decisions are made on the thresholds. But I'd like to start that as a conversation with all of you, or learn from you what other information you would need in order to set that threshold.
Are you talking about a $1,000 a month threshold for everybody and anybody on city council, or just for the mayor, or for the?
It wasn't clear.
I think the
That was
discussion
not
we had in
clear.
the past was something about a lesser amount for councilors, and that some folks felt that, just to increase it to $1,000 a month for the mayor might be fair, but others felt, there was a lot of different opinions.
Absolutely.
On the entire subject.
So the person who actually said this is no longer in council. It's part of why we're here tonight. And that threshold was actually set because he had done research into the Bend process, where they had reached an agreement that was a little over $1,000 for the mayor and about $550 for the council members.
Right.
They went through a process where they looked at, when it was set into their charter, how much it was, and then they looked at what the rate would be if it accrued value over time at market. and that's how they reached their number.
And they ended up, if I remember correctly, with a percentage basis that increases, by COLA or by some percentage over?
By CPI.
Yeah,
We
by
would actually
CPI.
recommend that, whatever you decide, that we actually put in some sort of automatic increase so that you don't have to have this conversation every year or two, especially since there is that, the ethics question under the Oregon ethics laws. It would make it clean, really easy.
So my recollection was not so much that it was $1,000 was the magic cap, but that we saw that where Ben came was just was 1,066 or something.
Yeah.
And I think, there was a general feeling like, well, that's a different ball game than a salary level that would mean potentially cutting a staff member, right? That kind of an increase would not be to the level of having to cut a staff member or something like that. So, I think I hate to put an arbitrary number on it. To me, that's kind of the calculation to me is, how does it impact the budget? And, maybe it's 1,500, maybe it's 1,000, I just hate to put a.
Maybe it stays what it is. We've got to look at all.
Well,
Right.
but I think the
Options
question is whether or not the question is about
the
a threshold.
For
And so
sending it
it's
to the
not-
voters.
question, yeah, exactly,
Right, for going to the voters,
So we
right.
can still make the decision not to do it. That the question is, what is the threshold for whether we make the decision or whether we send it to the voters? And
Correct.
so I would suggest, if we can, to set that threshold at, and let's choose, what it is. Is it, is it CPI from whenever we can find out when it was last set.
Absolutely.
And then just go from there. And I think that would be a reasonable threshold. And it will land probably something less than $1,000, I would imagine, especially if it was last set in.
It'll end up
2007.
at less than $1,000
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
rate,
Yeah.
with our starting rate. Why don't we plan, this is not something we have to decide right away. We're still waiting on the grant, so I can come back in March with an update on a couple of different evaluation tools that you could use for that threshold. We just wanted to make sure we started this part of the discussion with you tonight. Go for it.
And there's actually one more question that is sort of a political question that we want to throw to you, which is the population that's going to be selected for this thing, and whether that is registered voters or whether that's residents. That's sort of the big question. There's sort of two ways of doing this random selection representation method, and one is to use voter rolls, and one is to use random addresses and randomly select within households. So, and then if it were the latter, then there would be a question of what should be the age cutoff at the low end. Should it be 18 or should it be 16 or whatever? And that's not a question that I certainly want anything to do with. So, so we want to toss that to you.
And part of why we were talking about it is that this could be a referendum. This could end up on the ballot. In that case, you typically would want to pair that to people who can vote. But this community and this council have also really liked getting feedback from individuals who can't. And so we were looking at what we realistically could do. 16 is about the lowest age that we could pull in for the conversation. But we could pull down to 16 if you would all prefer.
What really brings up a lot of interesting thoughts for me about that. On the one hand, you're right. Eventually, if we were to refer it to the ballot, then it would only be registered voters who would be participating in the decision. But certainly, everyone who lives in the city, contributes to the city's budget. So.
You also can sit on this tonight. We didn't provide you a staff report in advance because we literally had lunch today to figure out the last of this. But we did want to start the conversation. So we can put it into a staff report for a decision at the early March meeting, if you'd prefer. Are there any other questions?
Can I ask
so.
a
Yeah.
question about that?
Sure.
Would it be crazy to do something that was proportional to the number of, the percentage of residents of Milwaukee who are registered voters, percentage that are non-registered to make up the pool?
That's interesting.
Sorry, I'm a
using this-
sociologist at heart.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's kind of similar to one of the factors that we sometimes use in the CIR, which is the Citizens Initiative Review, which is voter frequency. We do have they voted in 2 out of 3 of the last presidential elections or not, to get at people that are involved in the democratic process and not. So that's sort of one of the optional factors. We've sometimes switched that out with renter or homeowner status. So that's another question that.
My only thought, and this is all going to come down to Lynn and his team, is just making sure that we are pulling addresses that make sense. So if we're going through the voter polls, it's easier for us to use one system versus another. So I would just make sure that whatever system we choose, we stay within that and find nuances within that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, no matter what, use one or the other. If it were addresses, then I suppose there could be a factor that related to voter registration, but I think probably that's not the best similar factor to get at that kind of thing.
Okay. And just making sure that it would only include Milwaukee. If you were looking at voters, it would only be Milwaukee
Correct.
voters, because it's not as clean as a zip code. But
Yep.
Right.
And we can help with that. We'll talk to Nick and make sure that the map overlaps correctly.
the information that you get off of, I mean, it's not that clean. So-
Well, I was going to say, the voter rolls are probably closer than, I don't know where you get the other ones, because we know that when the county came here some time ago, Health and Human Services folks, they had Milwaukee, which was down to Gladstone and out to I-205, and everything else was showing up as Milwaukee, so.
We can also, at the end, once we have the 20 to 30 individuals selected, we can do a quick double check to make sure that every single person selected was in the correct address. So we can add that to the process.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yep. We often do a validation sort of process like that. Mm-hmm.
So there were 2 questions that were asked, and they're at odds of each other. If we decided to go with just registered voters, then that takes the 16-year-olds off the table.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
I'm kind of agnostic about the registered voters, not registered voters, but I would like to start involving the youth more, because the decisions we are making are things that will affect them for the rest of their lives. So my personal opinion is that I'd like to see the 16-year-olds represented.
Are there any concerns with that perspective?
What?
Concerns with that perspective? Does that work for everyone? Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That works.
All right. Fair enough.
And then do you want me to bring back this with the more information at the March meeting so that you can set those thresholds?
Do you need this threshold for the process?
We've been talking about how we embrace this process as much as possible. So how do we respect the individuals who put in their time and effort? And there's a certain amount of making sure that they know what your barriers are to being able to support that. And if they came back at $1,500 a month and that was outside of your comfort zone, I'd like them to know that in advance, just so that they can have every piece of information in their decision-making process as possible. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. We're just trying to make sure that they have some clear sideboards, if you feel like there are clear sideboards in the process.
I don't, to me, that almost seems to
Taint the process.
taint their outcome, yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
That's true.
We don't have to put any on.
I mean, I get that you would want to say to them, you know, we're going to make, you're going to make recommendations. There may be a threshold at which there may be a point at which the council feels like it has to put the thing out to the voters, but to actually give them a number and have them thinking about that number and prejudicing, I'm not
Make
sure.
them up with our
Perhaps
own
the solution
threshold.
is to not give them that number, but I think it's warranted to have council make some sort of determination of a threshold to which it goes to voters, because after the number comes out the other side of the
Right.
black box, debates on whether or not we send that to the voters could be
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
And so it might not, we might choose to not give that $1,000 threshold to the black box, but I think arriving at that before we move any
Before we get
further,
it.
I think will make the process.
So what we
I
could
could see
do
that.
is we could each send you our threshold.
Absolutely.
You could average those numbers together, and that's your secret threshold.
Yeah, and the request that we're making, I think there's a couple pieces in this. The more we're in agreement about the process, the more likely it is that the end point is in some ways easiest for you, right? Because you've all agreed about the process we're going to go through in order to respect that outcome.
Didn't Councilor President Faulkner suggest a few minutes ago that we look at when it had been increased last time and what the COLA has been since
Yeah,
then?
it would
that-
probably end
that
up
was
being
just a-
about
Which, I mean,
$400 for the mayor and
But that's a little bit better thought
$275.
process of finding some kind of a threshold than just saying, well, I think it should be this, and I think it
Well, I
should be.
think now you all know my secret number if
Process.
you decide to go with the mayor's. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the
Let me
right
point out, we're not asking, I don't think, for you to make a decision tonight on that. We're willing to come back and give you some additional information
Yeah.
and to discuss that. And we can vet those different calculuses to come up with something that we can decide as a group that we want to move forward.
There's also, there's some discussion in this process about whether or not we have an attorney who comes in and helps draft referendum language for you to move forward to the ballot if it is at a certain point. We don't have to have a number to do that, but it makes sense for this group in particular to have that language prepared by this group and handed to you in the packet. So we are also going through that process a little bit for staff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, exact language sometimes matters quite a bit. So I think we're thinking that we're designing this process, assuming that there would be a referendum, that they're writing language for that. And then if there's not, I think the other thing I was going to add was that for the legitimacy and sort of transparency of the process, letting panelists know sort of from the outset what's going to happen with their work there's a certain importance in that as well, and not having that be sort of is the council just going to overrule this later?
And so is the question to them about monetary compensation only, or is it about all forms of compensation?
Well, and that's why we included the second
Benefits and-
question on there is the benefits. I will also come in with I think we're only looking at healthcare benefits, so I can come in with what the threshold cost for the city would be for both personal and family healthcare, so that you would also have those numbers. Those will drive you over your $1,000 pretty fast. So we want you to have that information in advance. Are there any other benefits you would like us to include within this discussion? Okay, then we'll make sure that we include that in the March staff report as well.
I had a question.
Sure.
Procedural one. So if we need to generate a number in a public setting, that might then be, how do we do this without tainting the pool? Because these are public record.
Yeah. So I will come back to you with 3 or 4 options, just for us to discuss. You can ask questions in that meeting so that you can sort of generate your own thought process around that. And then I think you just sort of, yeoman's on, whatever, your own honor, have to figure out what your threshold is and hold to that. The mayor offered the option of sending me an email with that number. I think that works. I just won't share it with anyone until we put it into a public record at the end of the process to make sure that that's clear that this is a public vetting process. But I also just want to go back to what Lynn said before. The more information you do provide to the group, the more they take it seriously, the more they are going to hold this with a huge amount of honor. So you also at that meeting may decide during the discussion that you want to, as a group, decide that number. Either will be fine with me.
So isn't it just, what Lynn said, that they're working on the assumption that they're drafting a referendum, right? So maybe we just let them work on that assumption and we don't. I get Justin's point that we need to have it for our own,
that would
thing.
feel funky to them too if they came in at something and we went, okay, that's fine, we don't need a referendum.
Well, and we may want to ask them that question. You could ask them, at what point do you believe that this should see the voters' ballot?
Right.
So
Oh, that'd be
guess
good
ways to do that.
I thought I understood, maybe that they would be working toward that because that might be one outcome. That might be one option.
Yeah.
Not that that's the only outcome
Right.
of their group.
But in that process, they may say, hey, we looked at all the comparables, we had a lot of conversation about this. We really feel like that if you're going to approve something over X, that it should go to the voters for consideration. If it's under, we understand that that is something that's been generally adopted by other communities in a future budget. We would support you going, there are different ways they could write that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, to kick that question to the panel is definitely an option as well. Have them decide whether they want you to adopt it or whether they want voters to.
I guess either way, I'd want them working on the referendum itself, right? I mean, nothing you said would change that, right? Okay.
No.
And the only piece of this, Lynn's team has been incredible about coming to the table with money. So they are working on that piece right now. The only piece that the city is owning as a cost is attorney fees. We are planning on not having that done by Justin, but looking at who was hired by Bend and a couple of these other cities for the drafting of that language.
Great.
Well, any other questions right now from me about the process? I know that was a pretty quick overview of what this thing is, but we're so excited to have an opportunity to pilot this at a city on an issue that's really meaty. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Very much.
for agreeing to do it and work with us on it. I mean, I think that we're really lucky to have you come and volunteer to do this as your first pilot project on this issue. I think that's incredible. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, he's been an incredible partner on this, and Justin and I think both would be remiss if we didn't thank Lynn personally for the amount of time and effort that he's put in. We've met with him, I think, 3 or 4 times now. We've been working on an MOU agreement also just to make sure that we talk about resourcing from the city, and it's been great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the core questions, we were grappling with how do we keep ourselves apart from this, and so this is a wonderful solution.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
You can be assured we've had some very robust conversations about it. So it's actually been fun. It's been fun, a fun nut to crack, so.
Absolutely. It's been so much fun to work with you guys as well. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was that just the timeline, you sort of alluded to that there isn't funding for it yet. So that's a part, the grant is in process, and we won't know until toward the end of March. So there's a little bit of time. We're working on alternative sources of funding and whatnot, but it's still a bit up in the air.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have one more question. Would your, then what comes out of this, apart from whatever we end up doing with it, you would publish it as some kind of a report or something?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there'd be a public presentation. At the very end of the process is a sort of press conference that just involves the panel reading their statement that they've produced. And you would be invited there, the media or whoever else, and it would be published publicly.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
All right, tonight's consent agenda includes the council meeting minutes of January 12th, 2019, council retreat, January 15th, 2019 work session, and January 15th, 2019 regular session. A resolution approving the submission of an application to the Infrastructure Financing Authority for a special Public Works Fund loan for the Meek Street Stormwater Pipe Installation Phase 2. And a resolution authorizing the city manager to approve a public improvement contract with Holt Services, Inc. in the amount of $625,000 and $625,043 for the well drilling phase of Well 2 project located at 40th Avenue and Harvey Street, and reject the additive alternate A1 Well 2 decommissioning. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
No,
No.
I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Audience participation. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear citizen statements regarding city business. Those wishing to speak must fill out the yellow speaker registration card available on the table in the hall and identify agenda item number 4, audience participation. As council has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because the information provided during public comment may be new to some councilors, the city manager will respond at the next council meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Before we begin, are there any follow-up reports from the February 5th, 2019 audience participation, Ms. Ober?
There were not.
All righty then. So, Kiran Despala, come up and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Okay.
And when that goes beep, that's the end of 3 minutes.
Right, okay. All right. The reason I talked to you guys maybe 4 months ago.
Can you give us your name and?
Okay, my name is Kiran Das Bala. I live at 9725 Southeast 29th Avenue, Milwaukee, Oregon. And I already did talk about this tax somebody is taking out my Social Security money, $140.85 for last 2 months now. But before that, it was $138.70. So, for last 3-4 years, they have stolen. I wrote 4,000, but it's 5,000. I just forgot about that. So up to now, they stole that much money. So I went after them that why you are doing it. So they said, if you file tax for 2011, then we will resolve it. And I did. January the 11th, I sent the IRS the new everything done, and I never paid that much to any CPA, and they charged me $400 for it. And still they are stealing the money. And they came up with that Kiran doesn't know those 264,000. That means my ex-husband with Mr. Bill Clinton and George Bush and Mr. Donald Trump. They are all involved, and they are taking out the money. And I don't know why. So here is the, you could keep this because I have about 12. This one came today. So if you could help me with that, because they are told not to take my money out anymore. And they explain everything. The money is missing $1.9 million. And Mr. Donald Trump admits that he has it. So please help me with that. That's all I need. I need to get my money because my roof is all bad. I need to fix it. I don't have money to fix it. I have my retirement fund, but that's not good.
If you're going to speak, you need to be by the microphone because.
So, I'm just saying that if you could help me with all these things and they don't do it again. So Mr. Donald Trump need to return my $1.9 million so I could get my house ready for everything. And as I said, I can't take my retirement fund and then go fix the house because something could go wrong tomorrow. Then what am I going to do? So please help me. I will be gone for 1 month again because my grandson has his 3rd birthday. And he goes, Grandma, you're coming, right? I go, okay, Babu, I'm coming. So I'll be gone for 1 month, but I'll be back April the 5th.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
She should probably take her legal letter.
Yeah.
Too much.
She needs to have this letter.
They want my money. I am not sure. They like my money. My money is worth something, I think. Must be.
All right, and that's on the.
Yeah, I have this 12 for 20.
All right, anybody else? Then our next item is the zoning and comprehensive plan amendments for Railroad Avenue, file number ZA-2018-002 and CPA-2018-002, an ordinance. The public hearing on the proposed zoning and comprehensive plan amendments on Railroad Avenue files ZA CPA-2018-002 and CPA-2018-002 is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is for the council to take public comment on the proposed amendments and to consider an ordinance to adopt the proposed amendments. Staff will now note the relevant zoning and ordinance criteria.
So it is Chapter 19.902, Amendments to Maps and Ordinances, and Chapter 19.1008, Type 5 Review.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, conflicts, where are we? Does any member of council wish to announce any actual or potential conflicts of interest?
No.
Nope. Does any council member wish to announce any ex parte contacts?
I would like to note that this is in the Linwood neighborhood area, and at our last Linwood NDA meeting, there was discussion about it. I refrained from entering into the discussion and was strictly a bystander at that meeting, but just want to be sure I say that.
And I received an email that I then forwarded to all of you and put on the record, so. Anybody else? Okay, does any member of the audience wish to make any challenge to any council member's impartiality or ability to participate in this decision? Seeing none. Staff report. Mary.
All right. Hello, I'm Mary Heberling, and I'm an assistant planner with the City of Milwaukee. I believe most of you know me, so hello. I'll go over the staff presentation for this zone change and comprehensive plan amendment. So we'll start off where, in particular, the properties are. It's these 4 properties. 2 are vacant, 2 do have existing homes on them. They are all R7 currently, surrounded by an R7 plan development, the PD there, and then business industrial to the south of them. And you can see here they are proposing to change from R7 to R5 for these 4 properties. And that would also change the comprehensive plan from low density to medium density. So R7 is low density, R5 is medium density. So that's where the comprehensive plan update goes into it. Or sorry, it's considered moderate density, not medium density. So the proposal requires a review of both the zoning map amendment, so the change from R7 to R5, and then the comprehensive plan map amendment, so the low density to moderate density. And then on January 22nd, 2019, Planning Commission heard the proposal and made a recommendation to City Council to approve. So for the zoning map amendment, we have approval criteria in the code that lists out how to assess this proposal. One's compatibility with surrounding neighborhood and predominant land use patterns, demonstrated need for the zone change, adequate facilities are able to accommodate the zone change, as well as consistency with the comprehensive plan, metro, and state goals and policies. For the comprehensive plan amendment, we have additional approval criteria, consistency with city goals and policies, as well as it's in the need of the public interest and serves the public need, and again, consistency with metro and state goals and policies. So the key issue here that I'm going to talk about for the presentation is essentially, is it appropriate to rezone these sites from R7 to R5? A couple things to consider. When we talk about approval criteria, they talked about compatibility with surrounding neighborhood. It does have the change from R7 to R5 would essentially mean a couple different things. It would mean that lot sizes could be 5,000 square feet at a maximum or a minimum, and compared to R7, which is 7,000 square feet. So the lots would be a little bit smaller. You'd probably get about 12 to 15 more lots with the zone change on for the 4 properties versus what's currently allowed. The uses that are allowed in the R5 zone are the same as the R7 zone. It's a predominantly single family style zone. So most likely what would be proposed for development on those lots would be similar to what is currently surrounded the properties. We do have over half of the city is zoned in R7, with only about 10% being zoned R5. And so the R5, again, allows a little bit more flexibility on smaller lots, a little bit more flexibility on setbacks and those types of things, but otherwise it's pretty similar to the R7 zone. And like I said before, it does give you the opportunity to build a couple more houses than what is allowed currently. We do also have a demonstrated need for about 1,150 new housing units by 2036. That was stated in our housing needs analysis in 2016. And it states that 71% of those new housing units should be have a basis for home ownership. And it also did talk about what, in terms of the housing we need. We have an unmet need of housing from around 240,000 below. We do have a surplus of around 240 to 500,000 for houses. So that's something to consider in terms of the change that would happen from R7 to R5. You could argue smaller lot sizes could potentially mean smaller homes, which could potentially be more affordable, but as a staff person who's not building on the property, I can't control or have any sort of say over that. But in terms of R7, it is larger lots. They have the ability to build potentially larger homes as well. So two sides of the coin there. We do have a need for housing, but we also have a need for lower cost housing as well. So there's that sort of two sides of that. As the mayor mentioned, we did receive one comment in regards to the proposal, basically concerns around some of the large fir and white oak trees that are on the property. Here is the next slide that shows you our natural resource overlay zone. So the green is the vegetated corridor, and the orange color is our habitat conservation. So I believe the trees that they're concerned about are in between those two vacant properties there. And it looks like a majority of our natural resource zone does cover that. So development on those two lots would be subject to extra standards regarding any trees on there as well. But go ahead.
I would just say that I drove by there earlier today, and that you can see the dark green that's sort of above the D and Railroad. That is also a pretty large white oak.
Okay.
So just for reference.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I walked it today, and the two in the middle of the green swath on the other property, on the whatever,
Yeah,
those are definitely white oaks. But a lot of that other along the close to the property line is definitely not white oak. A lot of it's dead. Some of it has vines and clematis growing up it, and so it may look like it's leaves, but it's actually ivy and clematis. And other ones are, I don't know what they are, but they're not white oak. So.
Yeah, the fir trees, the mature fir trees are on the two
Developed
parcels
lots.
that we're not discussing that are developed right now.
Right.
That one large green blotch right above the D and Railroad was definitely a very tall, elderly white oak.
And it's not notated here on the map, but there is a wetland that's at the northeastern part of the middle property, the middle vacant property. So there's that we are aware of as well.
Does that green swath map to some sort of, underground stream or anything like that? Is that why they coincide with the wetland?
Yeah, typically the green vegetated corridor is around water resources.
Yeah.
So I do believe that there is some water that falls down through those two vacant properties. But that's, typically where those green hashes, the vegetated corridors around those resources.
Thanks.
Yeah. So in terms of staff recommendation, we do recommend to approve the land use application. We didn't provide any conditions of approval, so it would just be on the findings that we provided in attachment 1. And as the city council, you have 4 options. You can approve, subject to the recommended findings of approval from the staff. You can approve, subject to modifying findings and conditions as well, if there's any. You could deny upon finding that it does not meet approval criteria, or you can continue the hearing as well. And I'll leave that with any questions.
No other correspondence?
No. Mm-mm.
That housing needs assessment is now, what, 3 years old?
Yes.
And how much have we seen that sort of middle section go up in that period
I
of time?
don't know the numbers off the top of my head, so I wouldn't be able to probably give you an accurate assessment, but most likely prices have increased in the region. So I would assume Milwaukee as well, prices have increased.
Okay, anything else?
Not question. Can you put up the criteria?
Criteria, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's,
For this one or the zoning one?
well, if we can easily get back and forth as we're.
Yep, they're right next to each other.
Okay. So, does anyone wish to comment on the proposed amendments? I have Jeff's card here. The council will now take public testimony on the proposed amendments. I will recognize speakers, and any questions should be addressed through me. When you come to the table, state your name and city of residence for the record. Presentation times for all speakers will be limited. The proponent / applicant and representatives of groups will be limited to 10 minutes. Individuals will be limited to 3 minutes. Please confine your remarks to the proposed amendments and avoid repetition and irrelevant information. We'll start with the applicant, and you will have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. My name's Jeff Bolton. I live at 1438 Pine Street in Lake Oswego, Oregon, 97034. And just to give you some quick history of this development and this application, the determination for the wetlands and the natural resources were assessed prior for us before we got involved with the property. And knowing the fact that we had to extend 56th Street through the property to Railroad Avenue, it kind of gave us limitations on how we would develop the future lots. And that included the wetlands had to put in a 50-foot buffer. So based upon that, when we filed for our pre-application conference with city staff, we represented 5,000 square foot lots. And so we put out there that we were asking for a comprehensive plan amendment and a zone amendment as well. And so it took some time, but we, at the pre-application conference, city staff then asked for us to ask for other properties, adjacent properties, because I'm only involved with tax lot 3000 at this point. So we had to go to the neighbors, and that took a little bit of time to have them sign on for the additional tax lots of 2900, 3100, and 1300. And so that's where we are at this point. We have done preliminary work with the subdivision application at this point, but it was just taking some time. The developer had some ideas, and so we went ahead and let's just finish out the zone amendment and comp plan amendment at this time. So that's where we are. We went through Planning Commission, we've read through the staff report, and we appreciate all the time and Mary's involvement to get us to this point. Obviously, we still have subdivision application work to be completed, deemed complete, and go through the hearing process as well. So I'm here in support of the staff report and the conclusions, what has been put together at this time. And if you have any questions, I will try to help out and answer them for you.
Sure. Anybody? So one of the criteria that we use in the findings talks about housing affordability, how this potentially improves housing affordability because it's a smaller lot size. So I want to try and dig into that a little bit. my impression is that house prices tend to be run by the market more than by lot sizes, generally. And I'm curious if when you did your pro forma for your concept, if you had a target housing price that you were kind of had in mind, that this will pencil, this won't pencil.
In all honesty, so I work for the engineering firm. We don't really get involved with the houses, although we are cognizant of the housing needs analysis, and I have talked to the developer a little bit about it, and we'll have a better idea once we finalize our lot layout, because we also have to show a shadow plat of the neighboring properties. We have stub streets we have to build as well. So we're only going to be I'm just looking at the 6 lots for our property, and they do have to, we have costs associated with tying into Railroad Avenue, stub streets, dealing with all the future tracts of property we're going to have on the buffers. But I think we probably would need to discuss that more at the subdivision application process as opposed to this time, because I really don't get involved with the house costs. But the developer is aware and cognizant of your housing needs analysis, and I can say that at this point. But I think at the subdivision application, finishing it up, that we'll probably address it a little bit more at that time. We do know, like Mary said, smaller lots, supporting the smaller lots, smaller houses will have less costs, and we are now able to actually get a couple more lots in there to help offset the costs for the development of this project.
I have a question.
Sure.
You were at, and I watched the Planning Commission hearing, and Commissioner Hemer brought up a question about the gist of it was why not more? Why not, noting that 2 properties down were R1s. So my question is, was there ever any consideration of something more than R5, or has it always just been a consideration of R7?
It's only been R5 is the only thing that came up, and that was the only thing we had at the pre-application conference, and nothing further was asked of it at that time.
But there was no consideration of going in and asking about that process?
No.
Okay.
I don't know how to phrase this question, and it may not actually be a question for you. I'm not quite fluent in planning speak just yet, but my recollection is, and I may have misunderstood what you were saying, but you brought up the part where there's a fair amount of the parcel that you're dealing with, the tax lot that you're specifically dealing with, that is a wetland. Mm-hmm. I assume that means that is not developable by, according to city code restrictions. My understanding is that when that occurs, you get to build slightly denser in the overall property, regardless of what the zoning is, which Mary's going to come help me out here. Thank you, Mary.
Me too.
There is a particular part of our natural resource code that you could go through that process. It's like the residential cluster process through the natural resource zone. It's typically used for properties that have large amounts of natural resource on their property. So then rather than going into the natural resource zone, you still have the same density that would be used for that property based on the size, but it would be more concentrated in a particular area of the lot that's most likely has the least impact on the natural resource area.
So what's the standard for a lot? Like a half acre of a 2-acre parcel sounds like a lot to me.
Maybe rephrase the question.
How do you define, when does that get triggered?
Oh, yeah.
I'm learning.
No, that's good. At the subdivision, so when they're actually creating the lots. So when they come in, propose the subdivision, that's when it triggers natural resource. That's when it triggers all the subdivision regulations. At the zone change level, we don't have anything in our natural resource code.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not specific to a particular zone, it's particular to that point in the process.
Correct.
I think I get it now, thank you.
Has the developer you're working with ever done cottage clusters or anything like that?
Cottage clusters, I don't,
So it's a,
not at this point. Maybe some future developments in some preliminary stages on some really larger developments, if I understand what a cluster type cottage is.
it's just, typically it's a house that's 800 square feet or smaller.
Okay.
And then it's
Potential.
they do ways that they can put more of those into a lot than
Yeah.
you could say as single-family homes.
Potentially, yes, down the road in other jurisdictions that I'm dealing with down in the valley with them, but those are preliminary. I've dealt with them in multifamily, all kinds of, lots of multifamily, commercial development, subdivisions and stuff. This is the smallest project I've dealt with them before on. And anyhow, like what you were mentioning too, it's like it's only 1.83 acre property and half acres taken up with the requirement of the buffering with the wetlands and the drainage ditch that goes down along the east side of our property and stuff. So, but we haven't discussed anything further about this at this point.
This is probably not a fair question to ask, so I apologize in advance, but if this is the smallest project, do you have a sense for whether or not part of the interest this developer has in the project is related to the long-range potential to develop that entire 4-parcel section down the road, or this is a totally speculative question, so.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't have anything.
Anybody else?
I watched the Planning Commission hearing also, so that answered a lot of my questions.
Yeah,
up
me
front.
too.
Yeah, me too. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Do you want me to stay up in case there's more?
Does anybody else wish to testify either in support or neutral or against? Nothing? Okay. So, Mary, do you have any response to any of the testimony? No? Does council have any more questions for staff?
I don't think so. I think I understand it pretty good.
All right, if there are no further questions from the council, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on the proposed zoning and comprehensive plan amendments. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. The public testimony portion of the public hearing on the proposed zoning and comprehensive plan amendments on Railroad Avenue is hereby closed. Is there council discussion?
Sure.
I think it looks good. I think, Planning Commission did the work for us and staff, and it looks good.
I think, so watching the Planning Commission, I just want to note, because I don't know that everyone watched the hearing, I do think that there were some smart observations made. I think that, would you mind if we just go back one screen? Because I think we have 2 screens of criteria, and I just want to make sure that we're looking at all about the demonstrated need. And I guess, so for me, that question isn't,
Sorry.
the question was, does it satisfy a demonstrated need? And I think that the answer is yes. I thought there was a good observation that, could it be more? And I think the answer to that is also yes. And what this has illustrated to me is that that's exactly why we're doing the work with our comp plan, and why we have so much more work to do in our zoning, because I don't think that we are incentivizing the kinds of development that would get us to every needed housing type across the city. And so I appreciate that observation, and it makes me very, very motivated to make sure that that we're being very bold when we move forward with our comprehensive plan update, and then when we start to talk about, changing the zoning and changing the code so that we are incentivizing the kinds of housing that that this council and the previous council has said we'd like to see in the future. I don't think that our current comprehensive plan and our current code tells us that, and that's discouraging to me. But that's where we are. And so in my view, I really appreciate those comments. I feel them too. But I do think that I don't see any grounds for, I'm not seeing any grounds to not allow this application, these applications. Those are my observations.
I did watch the Planning Commission, and I agree that Commissioner Heber made some very compelling points, and my heart hurts for missed opportunities. This is a big chunk of land, and we don't have big chunks of land. I understand the tax lot that we're talking about is not as large, but we're talking about a zoning change for 6 acres. And if we had not R5 zoning, but R3 or R1,
or something else,
we could house a lot of people.
Yeah, that's sort of, God, you guys, I'm sorry. It won't help. That's sort of my heartache too, is that, we're doing all this work to allow the missing middle housing forms in our city, and there's not a lot of lots left in our city that you could actually fit something like that, like a cottage cluster or a row house or something that's going to be more affordable to a first-time home buyer or to somebody, an empty nester that's looking to downsize. So it sort of breaks my heart that we're losing the opportunity on yet another piece of property to get some more affordable housing built. I agree with your look at the code, and that we don't really have any room to maneuver there. But it was interesting. I had a conversation with Alma earlier, a while back, about cottage clusters. And I always assumed that there'd be a lower profit margin in the cottage clusters because they're smaller houses, right? Turns out it's the opposite. Because there's so many more houses, there is actually a higher profit margin for developers in a cottage cluster, and it still gets us affordable housing. So I'm I can't wait for us to get done with this process, because I think that's your incentive, right? If we can let enough developers know that.
And I think there are probably many creative ways that we incentivize the types of development that would actually serve the needs of, the current needs of Milwaukee and the future needs of Milwaukee. We've got so many people aging out of their current homes, and their only choices are to leave.
Yep.
And that does break my heart.
Yeah.
So I don't know what all of those schemes are, but I hope that together in the community, we can come up with ways that we might incentivize a more diverse array of housing types.
And there's some part of me that hopes that somehow the process around this particular lot will align with something farther down the road when the subdivision does come to Planning Commission, that maybe there will be different opportunities available at that point in time.
Could well be.
Well, and certainly for the other
Those
three
two other
lots on the,
too,
Right.
so.
Well, and just because of that wetlands designation on such a significant portion of the parcel, it seems like that right there would be a great incentive to do a higher density housing cluster sort of model if we've got the code there to enable it at that point in time.
To protect the
Yeah.
wetlands and those 2 oaks. It would be really great to be able to keep those oaks.
Three oaks.
Three.
Three oaks.
I went today, so my brain was
It's okay.
not great. Anything else? Anybody?
Are you ready for a motion?
I suppose.
I move for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance to amend the zoning map to rezone tax lots 12E31DD, lots 2900, 3000, 3100, and 12E31DB 801300 from residential R7 to residential R5, and to amend the Milwaukee Comprehensive Plan land use map to designate tax lots 12E31DD, 2900, 3000, 3100, and 12E31DB 01300 as moderate density rather than low density. File number ZA 2018-002 and CPA 2018-002.
I second.
can I point out that the, no, you read it right. It's typed wrong. There's a missing 8 in the second number. The 12E31DB 801300 is what the first time it appears says, and it's missing the 8 the second time?
Would you like me to read?
I don't know which way is correct, with the 8 or without the 8. Do you know?
Any idea?
We can look. I don't know. Well, let's look at the report.
We can pull up the planning commission video and see what they said.
Well, I was going to say, it's maybe in the ordinance,
mine's the same
actually.
as
It's
well.
probably,
Maybe your packet is wrong, because mine has the numbers the same.
And what are they?
12E31DB01300.
So no 8.
no 8. Okay.
Okay, so then can I just
You can just,
amend from the last one?
yes.
So the last one was right.
Yeah, last one's good. So just, we're good, right? She doesn't have to read that again?
I would think so. And that was probably just somebody who's typing that was going too fast.
All right. And did I have a second?
Yeah.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded for first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance to amend the zoning map to rezone tax lots 12E 31DD, lots 2900, 3000, 3100, and 12E 31DB 01300 from residential R7 to residential R5, and to amend the Milwaukee Comprehensive Planned Land Use Map to designate lots 12E 31DD, 2900, 3000, 3100, and 12E 31DB 01300 as moderate density rather than low density. File number ZA-2018-002 and CPA-2018-002. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Since the vote was not unanimous, the ordinance must be read at 2 separate meetings. Ms. Ober, would you please read the ordinance one time by title only?
This is a first. An ordinance of the City of Milwaukee, Oregon to amend the zoning map to rezone tax lots 12E3 1DD, lots 2900, 3000, 3100, and 12E3 1DB 01300 from residential R7 to residential R5, and to amend the Milwaukee Comprehensive Plan land use map to designate tax lots 12E3 1DD, 2900, 3000, 3100, and 12E31DB 1300 as moderate density rather than low density. File number ZA 2018-002 and CPA 2018-002.
Mr. Stoffel, would you please? We don't poll the council until the second one?
We'll just announce that there'll be the second reading and the polling of the council on March 5th.
All right, cool. Then the second reading and adoption will be set for the next council meeting on March 5th, 2019.
Mayor, can we take a 2-minute break?
Can you do what?
May we take a 2-minute break?
Sure, let's make it a 5-minute break.
I think we're going to call the scooters conversation. We can stay and have the
Legislative.
legislative discussion and then call out.
Okay.
Does that work?
Do you guys mind? Thank you, because my brain is not on full.
Nope,
No,
we pulled it.
We're pulling that too.
So everything will be done after the legislative discussion.
Cool.
Sorry, Kelly.
It's fine, right?
Yeah. For that one, I want to be.
So we're going to stay for the LOC discussion?
Angel's not here yet.
I thought I had notes on that, but apparently, I don't know where I put them now. There was.
My God, this thing gets bigger every time.
Oh, wait, just wait.
I know.
Did I send you some emails? Is that where I wrote
June
notes?
is so far away.
You sent me an email about green buildings, that you had a conversation with Tracy.
No, this would have been today.
Another one asking, you mean to both Angel and I, to see if anybody could draft up something on property taxes or something else. You also forwarded the MMC update.
Right.
You've forwarded 2 of those, yeah.
Yeah, I think there was something towards the bottom of one of the MMC updates.
There was. Do you want me to print it?
The band thing?
It was the property tax discussion.
There was another.
Do you want me to tell you?
Pretty sure.
Was it bag band?
I've got them right here.
Oh, shoot.
And then I was on the QBS call. I've got all that on my list.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead and, wait, it's, no, never mind. Yes, please, print it.
Do you want her here?
Angel's not
Oh,
here.
yes.
Do you want to go home right now?
No,
Seriously?
I want to be here for this, I know.
Okay.
I've been driving back and forth to Salem 4 times in the last week. It's, feels like,
And we're on air, so I'm going to have a discussion while we're waiting for Angel. So we're just going to punt this, I think, the e-scooters conversation to the first meeting in March. Do we have time on that schedule? Can you check?
Gosh, did I delete one of those? So the other things on the week 3 recap,
Are you thinking of the
No,
request
Very-
from Kim Graves? What's the next one?
oh,
last item.
Yeah, it's about the
The courts.
the courts. The 2 bills about the driver's licenses.
Yeah, not being
And
able to
fees.
use
I have that too.
Okay.
You think while I'm talking, and then when I don't hit on it, you'll know I didn't get it.
the last thing on the MMC on your email was about the,
We have department head tomorrow, too.
was about HB 2001.
Which is, oh, yeah.
That's, and then 2020, the cap
I just
and trade.
emailed you,
So Those
Kelly
were the
Peters,
looking
you
to
wanna
next
reschedule
week.
this?
Dang it.
Do
Oh,
you
well.
want the forecaster?
Just,
Ready?
yeah. So we are back in session, and Kelly Brooks will take us through our legislative agenda.
Okay, thank you. And for folks in the back of the room, we're not planning to really talk about any regional positions tonight. We're mainly going to be focused on the state bills that we've been emailing around, I believe. So I guess first off, I did touch on a few different items in the staff report, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about Bill's issues that have popped up since that time. First, I said that under HB 2001, I believe you all know that, council unanimously decided to support the bill at the last meeting, but then asked for a set of amendments or tweaks to it. That was conveyed in the form of testimony to the committee directly, and the mayor also went down and testified on the bill. I have reached out to Kenny Geyer's office to see where they are with amendments. I haven't really heard back, so I may need an assist there if I haven't heard. I know there will be amendments, but I don't know when they're going to happen, and there hasn't been a work session scheduled. So everyone seems, including in your update, everyone seems to feel that amendments are going to happen, but I don't know when they're coming.
There's nothing on OLS, yeah.
And then in terms of the rent control bill, I think you all know, flew out of the Senate. It's now flying out of committees in the House, and it's expected to pass the House, I think, by the end of the month. So that one's moving through. The issue that was just kind of more brought to my attention today is there is a statewide, a bill, HB 2509, that's related to banning plastic bags. There was a public hearing held on that bill today. At that hearing, there was a -5 amendment that was presented, which would actually preempt local governments from having their own bans. The key differences we're seeing in that bill at this time is that the enforcement fee is actually higher in the statewide bill than the one that we would be charging. If I'm reading, and again, I was just reading this while I was sitting at the back of the room, so we're still kind of processing it. They take a different approach. Ours is limited to the 10,000 square foot businesses. Theirs is set up a little bit differently. The biggest issue I think I see at this moment in time is theirs doesn't address polystyrene and ours does. So I'm trying to sort out, does that mean we're fine and our polystyrene ban would stay?
It's not got anything to do.
Because it doesn't have anything to do with it, or does it somehow repeal our polystyrene component? And I have to actually talk to our lawyer, and I just haven't had a chance to kind of look at what implications it has. But I think the conversation for you all to have after we continue to process what's the actual impact on us is, do you want to take a position just on preemption in general? In some ways, this is pretty common when you do a statewide measure, that you would make it consistent across the state. In other ways, it's, it stops local governments from, yeah.
To me, this is a win. If we have every city in the state doing it, it's better.
Yeah.
Have to pick our battles too.
Yeah.
We don't have a staff.
It's true. I agree with battle picking. So I think if let me know how else you feel, but if I'd like to continue just to assess if it's going to impact particularly the polystyrene ban, because that seems problematic.
Yeah, that would be a
Well,
good question.
but I mean, we were going to do a stat follow-on bill anyway, right?
Right.
And so our follow-on bill could just be polystyrene only, and we could clean it up, wouldn't be.
And so, do they have a shop size or anything that limits, or is it just across the board? All I haven't read that.
Oh, I handed my staff measure summary to Peter.
Enough.
And he took it with him.
It's okay. We don't need to know today.
Okay,
Yeah.
can I send something around? I have more work to do. I really don't. I know enough to know that the -5s are in play and they're likely to proceed, but I still need to continue to assess the impact on us. Okay, so the next kind of hot topic is around property tax reform. So that was in the league bulletin. It was also in the mayor email that Mayor Gamba sent around. There is a hearing tomorrow afternoon at 2:20. If the city would like to submit testimony, the league is asking for general support of the concept, not really to get into the details of the proposal, just state that it's not fair the way that it works today, and we would like the property tax system to be more fair. SJR 2 would amend the Constitution to establish the ratio of maximum assessed value to real market value may not be less than 0.75%. And then SJR 21 would repeal Measure 50. So those are the two things that they're talking about. Nothing's expected to move out of the hearing tomorrow, but if we want to submit anything in support of those measures, we would need to get it in by 3 p.m. So if this council would like to say, yes, unanimously, we would like, or however you want to do it, we want to do this, I would have to tell you that letter would be crafted by me, and it would be pretty short, but it would just basically be a statement in support from the city of Milwaukee saying, this is something we care about, and I would get it in by 3.
Do a paragraph why we care, right?
Yeah.
We're a built-out city. We don't, we have very little new construction that helps us keep up with the economy, unlike Happy Valley and Wilsonville. And so our, trajectory as we look out in our budget has us going into the red.
Yeah. And then my only thing, because I probably just made Ann have a heart attack by reading to write it, this would be an exception here because I just don't see any other way to get it in by 3 tomorrow unless I write a quick letter. But in general, I will still be looking to the council to actually draft these things up.
Yeah.
So just that's my caveat, if that's okay. All right.
At least until she's done being the acting city engineer.
Which I'm really excelling. I'm excelling at.
Just so that we're...
Yeah, we probably should.
Okay.
Yeah, I do actually need a motion.
All those in favor of supporting the property tax bills that are passing through the legislature?
Yeah.
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. Okay, there you got unanimous.
Okay.
I just found the one that I was trying to figure it out.
That's the one?
No. Property tax exemption extension for low-income housing.
Oh.
I didn't know there was a property tax exemption for low-income housing. I thought that was part of our problem.
They're talking about state no, there is
Right?
no
It would
state
either be-
property tax.
It's either property tax or it's not.
Is this 191 that you're looking at?
Yes, 191. So that even has less than the thing that I sent out from the mayor's. But the mayor's one had a little bit more that, and it's about low-income housing.
Okay. It's not
We'll do a
scheduled
little
for
research
anything?
on it, and we'll get back to you. But that does not jive with what we've been basing all of our decisions on, so, yeah. Give us till tomorrow, we'll send an email.
Cool.
Okay. I was just going to see where it is not scheduled for anything, so not as hot, but yes, we'll try to be smarter about it. Okay. HB 2614 and SB 776. These two bills were actually forwarded to us by our judge. They are, one would eliminate the court's ability to suspend a driver's license for failure to comply with a payment plan. That is actually scheduled for a hearing on 221, so that one's got some traction. The other one, SB 776, would eliminate the court's ability to suspend a driver's license for failure to appear on a citation, and that's SB 776. In the conversation I had with the judge, she felt like the overall intent behind these measures was sound in terms of trying to be more equitable and try not to create additional hardship for people, particularly people that may not have a lot of means. She was very worried about these two because she has very few tools to actually make people comply. And so she expressed concern that this would be difficult for her, and so asked that you all consider opposing them. So that's. Is that, I don't know if you had any other, okay.
And wasn't there something about there being the proposed replacement or something? Did you forward us an email from her?
I did, I sent it earlier today.
Yeah.
I wonder if they could be amended to have that only, to have that be something that if you are so low income that you just literally cannot pay this.
Like a hardship?
And yeah, like a hardship thing, and you still have to get to work or whatever.
Or driving like work only.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
Counselor Beatty, it does not say anything about replacement legislation in that.
I've heard of those situations where it's like, I got basically a suspended driver's license, but I can drive to work and back, but I can't like go down to 7-Eleven or drive to a movie or whatever.
Right.
If it could be amended that way, that's a lot more amenable.
And I think our judge has actually used a lot of her own good sense and discretion in order to make those decisions. I think what she's asking from you is to trust that she's going to use that discretion, but that without the tool, there's going to be a large number of people who she won't be able to enforce into action.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's what it sounded like. I mean, I trust her judgment, that's for sure.
I mean, I guess my recommendation would be to maybe to see how the hearing plays out on the 21st and see. I'm fairly confident this issue will be raised in terms of from the reason why our judge knows about it is because the folks across the state are paying attention and are concerned about the impact that this is going to have, and see what's in play. And then if there's something is in play that feels like us weighing in could have an impact, that we consider weighing in. I mean,
I would prefer that because I'm not interested in opposing it outright I would much prefer to suggest some improvements along those lines because I agree that we should not be taking driver's license away just without,
That's kind of where I'm at. We could.
Is that okay with?
Create a carve out.
Yeah, I'm okay with waiting to see where it lands. I mean, if it looks like it has legs, but I would totally be willing to do it if push comes to shove. You know.
Okay. Okay, so the next one on my list is qualification-based selection processes for contracting with engineering services and other professional services. So I sat on the lead call today, Mayor Gamba, that you forwarded to me. There is a consensus bill that's coming out and is scheduled for a hearing on Monday, which is HB 2769. That bill, so last session there was a bill that made it pretty far. It is pretty similar to that bill. This one does not include the state, so it's only for local agencies, so that works for us.
That's interesting.
It is, my read of it is it doesn't exceed $250,000, so there are a lot of contracts that we do that would not, that would be outside that, but for ones that are under it, it would provide a different path, and that path is that we could do a qualification-based selection process to get three.
Wait, so the more expensive the project, it doesn't?
Right, yeah, my read, and I can confirm it with Tracy, is that this is for $250,000 and under. Did I read that wrong?
I don't know, I didn't read it, but that just seems backwards to me. I mean, if it's under 250,000 and you're off, the other engineer would have been $5,000 cheaper, woohoo. But if it's a $5 million engineering bill and the other engineering.
If it's, say, an architectural contract, which you're deciding between three possible architects.
Maybe
What's the bill number?
2769.
Okay.
We'll see. Maybe I read it exactly opposite. Which has happened when I read things fast.
I haven't read it, so. Christine says you're right.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah. So, mapping, transportation planning, or land serving services for a project that does not exceed $250,000. So we actually do have a lot. I mean, I will say, this would still be a good tool for us, because anything under that, then we could, once we've screened for qualifications and I've got 3 people, we could then talk price. And I think that's better than what I got right now.
Sure.
So I'll take it. I think the main message I heard on the call today was, this is what we're getting, that they're not looking for testimony in support of it, that they are mainly concerned about rocking the boat because they don't want it to blow up on the floor like it did last time, that was what it sounded like. So I don't see a lot of, it didn't seem like there was a lot of opening. They may have just convinced me, of that on the phone call, but I think their main hope right now is just to get this tool in place and not have the deal fall apart. And they're worried about it coming in from outside entities that start to create dissent. So I think they're really hopeful that they have the hearing on the 25th, and then it quickly moves into a work session and continues to kind of move through the process and actually goes into place. So that's that one. I don't think we need to, unless we wanted to oppose it, I don't think we need to do anything.
I think this might be one of those bills where you pass it this way, and then next year you ramp it up to 5, and then the next year,
Stages.
Yeah, it's better than, it provides a tool we don't currently have.
Yeah.
So I'll take it if we can get it. Speed. Last time the council also proposed and wanted to support local control over speed. And so Councilor Beatty had drafted a letter. We did some quick revisions to that, which I've now sent back to you and you're fine with. I'd hoped to get it in the mail today. I didn't get it in the mail today. I hope I would like to get it out tomorrow. If you want to look at it before I put your signature on it. Yeah.
Prefer to.
Probably.
Things with my signature.
All right. Okay, I'll send it to you tomorrow, and you can look at it when it's not scheduled for a hearing right now, so it's okay. If it doesn't go tomorrow, it's been on my list of things to get out, and I haven't gotten it done.
It's the letter I wrote before, just with the bills swapped, because I had focused on the House bill that was not good for us instead of the Senate bill that is what we want. And so it's basically swaps that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's...
Go forth.
Go forth? You don't want to see it? Okay.
Does the letter not reference both?
It references.
It just references the Senate bill, but I asked her to be sure to copy Nose and Smith Warner, who are the sponsors of the House bill.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the way I tried to, it's again largely the same letter, but it's easier to support the thing we want
than to ask for something to be amended that's not currently scheduled for a hearing. And so this way, we can just send the letter straight to the Committee of Jurisdiction, which is a joint committee, and say, this is the thing we want, but then also take Councilor Beatty's approach, which is then copying everyone that has the other bill. And then there's also verbiage in there that says, or any mechanism, like regardless, this is what we want. We want to have the ability to lower speeds on these streets, whether it's in the House or the Senate, but not really focus on the House bill number. So I think we can always do a
Always come back
House bill if we need to.
Yeah.
House bill letter.
That seems to be.
That was everything on my list. Did I miss anything?
Mayor, can you give me the bill number again on the?
SB 191.
The sunset on the tax exemption.
There's no hearing.
Just FYI, there was an oil trains hearing on February 7th. There isn't very much on OLIS about, I mean, there are some statements of testimony, but there isn't an amended bill or anything yet. And there's a bill, I was looking at the stuff on the, small cell stuff. And there's a hearing on Thursday this week on HB 2560, but that's only a bill about directing DCLD to study how to mitigate for the aesthetics. So I don't think it's anything we want to die on our swords about. I guess they don't feel like they can do anything bigger than that on the small cells.
Sure,
Yeah. So those were the two that I had just been tracking.
Anything else?
What's the oil trains bill number again?
The oil train is HB 2209. There's a couple different ones, but that's the one that had a hearing, and that's the one I was told was going to move. That's actually the speaker's bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor, it does look like, just reading through this legislation, that it's based on if we went through the steps that we need to go through with the school district in order to get the exemption, it then affects that.
Oh,
so you would still have to go through that full process.
But what this is saying, I mean, if this doesn't pass, then that sunsets.
Yeah.
Then we got nothing.
Right. So it is the process that we have been discussing.
We care about.
We do probably care about it. I'm going to talk to Alma tomorrow, and we'll be in touch.
That's just crazy to me.
Was it sound like there's some interest in maybe someone working up, we'll talk with Alma about working up some support, maybe a support letter or resolution in SB 191. And I know that Councilor Beatty, you've talked about the oil trains one before. If there's interest in someone, drafting that up and sending something as that for HB 2209, since that's moving through.
I can call, the day we went to the Capitol, I picked up the card from the staffer who's got the lead on that.
Okay.
And she basically told me at the time that there were two different proposals afoot, one that had the rail companies footing the bill for doing these emergency plans, and the other having DEQ footing the bill, and they were not going to have DEQ footing the bill. And she said if that gets resolved favorably, that she thought the bill would go through pretty easily. But I can call her and follow up now that they've had a hearing and see.
Okay, that would be great. And just let me know what you find, I guess. And then I did also promise there were two last things. So the mayor did reach out to the LLC staff around the green buildings, and I think essentially what you learned is that the league is not opposed to the green buildings legislation. They are opposed to a specific element within it right now and are hoping to get that issue resolved, and then support will come back online. So it didn't sound like it was something that we wanted to charge the hill out about with league staff right now, that we understood where they were coming from.
Yeah.
Annexation, I did leave a message with Aaron. I haven't heard back. I just think they're really busy. It's one of these things like
if they need help, they're reaching out for help, but they're not going to call back to say they don't need help because they're like drinking out of a fire hose. So I haven't heard back from staff about those particular bills, but I think that probably just means those annexation proposals are not really proceeding at this point, or if they are, they don't need our help with
I looked them all up on OLIS, and they don't have hearing date. None of the annexation ones have hearing.
So I took no news as kind of good news, I guess, on those two, but I just wanted to close the loop because you all had raised those last time. So that's all that I have for today. And yeah,
Thanks.
I continue to be your not very great government affairs.
Exceptional acting city
You
engineer.
are the best government affairs person we have.
Yeah, I am the best you have. It's true. I am the best you have. And unfortunately for you all, yes. So, yeah.
I don't think we're that unfortunate.
And claim to be the best engineering director.
Aren't you reading his
She's
script?
Oh, yes, I am.
Many hats.
You're getting up and walking out.
Yes, I am.
Do we have, all right. I'll make the mayor's announcements since he's on his deathbed, it looks like. The city continues to receive applications for tourism grants through the Clackamas County Community Partnership Program. Qualifying projects are those that demonstrate an ability to bring visitors into Milwaukee from more than 50 miles away. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. on Thursday, February 28th. Our city manager, Ann Ober, will once again hold an open door event on Thursday, February 21st from 8:30 to 10 a.m. at City Hall. No sign-up is necessary. If you would like to ask questions, raise concerns, or just want to find out more about what is going on in the city, please stop by. Those attending are seen on a first-come, first-served basis. Clackamas County is currently gathering information about the Hillside Manor and Park project to learn more about community needs and interests. The process continues at an interactive community design workshop on Thursday, February 21st from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Ardenwald Elementary. Please join the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, NCPRD, at Spring Park and Elk Rock Island on Saturday, February 23rd from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Volunteers are needed for planting and removal of invasive plants. The Johnson Creek Watershed Council will hold their 21st annual watershed-wide restoration event on Saturday, March 2nd from 8:45 a.m. to noon. Volunteers can choose from 10 restoration work parties. The North Clackamas Parks and Rec District will hold a Three Creeks planting volunteer event on Saturday, March 2nd from 9 a.m. to noon. Volunteers will be installing hundreds of native understory shrubs. Provide input on the proposed buildings for Coho Point at Kellogg Creek site on Wednesday, March 6th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Milwaukee Masonic Lodge. The design process is kicking off, and this open house is an opportunity to provide your input to staff and the developer. For more information about each of the events mentioned, please visit the city's homepage at milwaukeeoregon.gov. There's a handwritten note here, too. Also, many of you probably received the postcard in the mail already about construction on I-205 from Sunrise. Lanes affected, it looks like. So starting February, mostly nighttime closures. I'm not seeing exact dates. Sundays through Thursdays, lane closures, Sundays through Thursdays from 8 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. Fridays, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Saturdays, 8 p.m. to 9 a.m. Ramp closures, Sundays through Thursdays, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Fridays, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Saturdays from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. Please get more information at www.i205construction.org. That's all I've got for announcements.
I don't have anything else.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would so move to adjourn.
I'll second.
It is moved, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.
Thank you.